Here, a couple of years ago, the one and only Tom Peters and John Braddock from the World Socialist Web Site to talk about Bogdan, who's, yes, and at the time, when you two brothers here come on the show, he had been charged, correct?
That's right. We first spoke to you, yes, as you said, just over 2 years ago, after Bogdan Syrotiuk, a 25-year-old socialist in Ukraine, had just been arrested, I believe in April of 2024, and taken into custody. He was a leading member of the Young Guard of Bolshevik-Leninists, a socialist political organization in Ukraine, and he was arrested by the Ukrainian secret police and been held in prison ever since then, continues to be held there in appalling conditions. So he's now 27 years old, and on August the 10th, 2026, so about 10 days ago, he was sentenced in a district court in Pervomaisk to 15 years in prison for high treason under martial law. And the crime that he is accused of and convicted of now is of being a Russian agent and collaborator. However, the prosecution could not substantiate that in the trial. They couldn't produce any evidence that he had supported the Russian invasion, no evidence of sabotage or collaborating with the Russian military or anything like that. The only evidence, which is the basis for him being thrown in prison for 15 years, is the fact that he had written articles, 6 articles, which were referred to in the court, published on the World Socialist Web Site, which we had translated into English and can be read there, and that he had communicated with the editors of the website. Our website has also been banned in Ukraine and we're accused of being a Russian propaganda outlet, all of which is completely false and unsubstantiated. And I should add, during the trial itself, there were 2 highly respected criminologists in Ukraine who testified. They had examined all of Bogdan's writings and found no evidence of any treason or support for the Russian invasion. In fact, he opposed the invasion and the Putin regime. But that's not... that's not enough. I mean, his crime from the standpoint of the Ukrainian regime is that he calls for an end to the war and specifically calls for Russian and Ukrainian workers to stop slaughtering each other. There are some estimates showing 500,000 or 600,000 people have been killed in this war. And he called on the working class in both countries to oppose the war, to unite against both of these capitalist oligarchic regimes in Kiev and in Moscow. And that's the only way that the war will be stopped. He has also exposed the rehabilitation of fascism in Ukraine by the Zelensky government and the military. And that's what was noted by the court in particular in its sentencing decision. They said, and I'll just quote from our coverage of this, that his articles contained, quote, non-recognition of Ukraine's legitimately elected political leadership and democratic processes, comparisons with fascists and Nazis, this is in the sentencing decision, negative assessments of Ukraine's armed forces, and, quote, reinterpretation of national heroes and historical figures. So I'd like to maybe go through some of those points that he's been accused of doing, and because I think it really shows, this whole case shows, there is no democracy in Ukraine. The whole basis for this war is that Ukraine is a poor democracy just trying to defend itself against the dictatorship and authoritarianism of Russia. It's not the case at all. It's a heavily armed satellite of NATO and the United States, and the claim that Bogdan has committed treason because he doesn't recognize Ukraine's legitimately elected political leadership and democratic processes. Well, there is no democracy. Zelensky's presidential term expired in May 2024, so just over 2 years ago, in fact, just after Bogdan was arrested. Ever since then, Zelensky has been ruling as a dictator. Elections have been suspended indefinitely. Strikes have also been completely banned under martial law. And the country has no freedom of speech. The opposition parties that is, the major opposition party has been banned, as well as many others. All socialist and left-wing organizations have been banned. Anyone who calls for a negotiated end to the war becomes a criminal. And that's what the case of Bogdan exposes. He is one of many political prisoners in Ukraine, but it's particularly revealing because what he represents is the only way to stop and to bring an end to this war. I can go on. He's accused also, as I said, of, quote, reinterpreting national heroes and historical figures. Now, what does that mean? And making comparisons with fascists and Nazis. Well, actually, it's the Ukrainian regime that is rewriting history in order to glorify fascists and Nazi collaborators who joined the Nazis in the war of extermination against the Soviet Union and the Holocaust against the Jewish people. These are the forces. I mean, the Zelensky government has banned all symbols associated with communism. Statues of Lenin have been torn down, and they've put up statues and renamed streets in honor of Nazi collaborators, like the leader of the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, Stepan Bandera, who welcomed with open arms the Nazi invasion.
Let's just hold there for a moment on the Nazis.
Yeah.
Because I can remember 2 years ago, if I wasn't with you guys, I was playing people who were speaking about the Nazis in Ukraine. But at that time, it was sort of seen as, well, or shall I say, mainstream media, that, well, what Nazis are you talking about? That's gone, right? People know now, yes, there's Nazis there. What does that tattoo mean? And they find out, that's the Nazi thing. So there's no denying it now. So we have progressed in that way. Well,
it's still completely buried by the mainstream media. I mean, that you can find a lot on social media that tells you the truth of what's happening, or at least some of it. But the fact that, I mean, the Azov Brigade, or the Azov Regiment, as it's called, is a neo-Nazi organization that's integrated into the Ukrainian military and plays a leading role in the military. That fact has been denied repeatedly in the Western media, and there's an attempt to sanitize it. But what is, I mean, I think there has been a change in the past 2 years because of just how blatant the fascist character of this regime is. Just a couple of, I mean, to give one example, in May this year, there was a diplomatic crisis that erupted between Ukraine and Poland. The Polish government supports the Ukrainian regime and has given it weapons and so on, and supports the war against Russia. But nevertheless, its leader was forced to speak out against Zelensky because Zelensky had created a special military unit which he named the Heroes of the UPA. The UPA was the military wing of the Ukrainian nationalist organization that fought with the Nazis and killed at least 100,000 Polish citizens, along with Jewish people and Soviet people. And so the Polish president had to denounce the Zelensky regime and removed a Polish honor that they had conferred upon Zelensky in response to this. But that's just one example.
Yeah, I think this also goes along with the fact that the war itself has become increasingly unpopular in both the Ukraine and Russia. I mean, there is developing mass opposition to the war amongst ordinary people in both countries. And evidence of that in the Ukraine is the fact that it's becoming increasingly difficult for the regime to recruit cannon fire, basically, for the war. They are now sending groups of thugs around to lift people off the streets to sling them into the army. And even today, there is a news report has come through that one of Zelensky's ministers is now proposing that the way for them to sustain the troop numbers is to make it compulsory for women in the Ukraine to register for a draft. So these are all indications that the war itself has become increasingly unpopular, and that is also the case in the rest of Europe. The working class across Europe increasingly recognises that that they are on the front line of a possible nuclear conflagration. That in any case, the participation in the war is now by the European powers is being funded by massive cuts to social security, social programs, and so that the whole attempt by the mainstream media and the imperialist politicians to maintain popularity for this war is just collapsing.
Mm. And I think that's why we see such a draconian sentence against Bogdan. 15 years in prison for writing 6 articles for our website, and he is in atrocious conditions. There are well-documented cases of torture in Ukrainian prisons. There was just recently we reported on a hunger strike by 162 Ukrainian prisoners across 6 different prisons in protest against the conditions, solitary confinement, inedible food, and depriving people of medical care, which is something that has happened to Bogdan. He is basically being tortured, and we have warned that being sentenced to 15 years in a prison where you're especially harshly treated if you're claimed to be a Russian agent or a supporter of Russia, and he's being deprived of urgently needed dental treatment, so he's in continual pain as a result of that. This is very, very common. But just to add to what John was saying, there's a poll last year by Gallup, a mainstream polling company in the United States, which found that 69% of Ukrainians want a negotiated end to the war. So more than 2/3 of the country is against the war. And there have been a huge number of soldiers who have deserted. Over 300,000 criminal cases have been opened by the state against soldiers who have deserted. And of course, millions more have just fled the country before they could be called up. So the and there, you can find on social media images of what John mentioned, the gangs going around in vans trying to snatch people of military age and take them to the front lines where there's a very high chance of being killed. And you can also find protests against this that have erupted in recently one in Lviv. There was a protest involving young men who surrounded a recruitment team and vandalized their vehicle and so on. So there is, this is an extremely unpopular regime. There's rising opposition, and their response to that is to intensify repression, and that's what we're seeing here.
Let's hear some words about just the general state of it, the warmongering that is going on, and we'll talk about Iran later and the US, but just that state of mind in a capitalist so-called country like Ukraine, that this warmongering can continue with, yes, as you said, 2/3 of the population pretty much against it. And it's just, what's wrong with people?
Well, it does point to, and there is a connection between the war against Iran, the war in the Middle East, the genocide in Gaza, also the invasion or the regime change in Venezuela. What we're seeing is the eruption of global war. It's and Zelensky himself made that clear when the Ukrainian military recently was deployed to attack an Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea. Zelensky basically was making clear to the United States that we can be useful to you in the war against Iran, to try and cement ongoing U.S. support for the war against Russia. They're seeking to merge these two wars, essentially. As we've said, this is, and I'll quote from something that David North, the editor of the World Socialist Web Site, the chair of the World Socialist Web Site editorial board, said recently that world war is not a future threat, but a presently unfolding reality. It's an ongoing process with interlocking theatres where all of economic life in the United States and across Europe and increasingly around the world is being subordinated to preparations for war. This is being openly talked about now in the Financial Times and other publications, that the wars against Iran and Ukraine are linked, and what's at the bottom of it is the profound crisis of American capitalism. It's got about $40 trillion in debt. It's built on an AI bubble, a sort of which is totally unsustainable, and the solution to this that they have is to conquer and basically steal the resources of other countries. There's if one wants to ask what is the cause of the war in Ukraine, you can go back to 1990 and 1991. When the Stalinist regimes dissolved the Soviet Union and became capitalist oligarchs in Russia and Ukraine and all across Eastern Europe. And the United States seized on that, and NATO seized on that as an opportunity to expand and to basically try and reverse all of the obstacles to imperialism to its total domination over Eastern Europe and the Middle East that were put up by the Russian Revolution and anti-colonial uprisings that were inspired by the Russian Revolution, which had cut off all of those resources during the 20th century and stopped the United States and other powers from being able to exploit them. That's what they wanted. So they, in other words, to turn the clock back to, the period before World War I, when basically the imperialist powers had full control, could invade wherever they wanted, and had puppet regimes all over the world.
So we can see that there's the attack on you guys under the term socialism, and let's just define that in a way for people as, let me just say, there's a few definitions out about things. It's very hazy for a lot of people. But socialism, basically, let me just hit you with this, as a step towards communism, and communism is the full government control, owns the companies. But under socialism, the government doesn't own the countries, but there still is companies that run their businesses. Well, I just want you to sort of put it in a nutshell, because I know a lot of people are hearing a lot of people talk about socialism, and thinking, okay, socialism, communism, and use this mic here.
Well, it's not government control in that sense. I mean, socialism and communism are based on control by the working class. A socialist revolution requires, as happened in Russia in 1917, a revolution to overthrow the established capitalist regime, and the working class seizing control of the factories, of the major corporations, and nationalisation of the corporations, and it involves a different type of rule. It doesn't involve rule as in a capitalist country with a government imposed from the top. Working class rule is established through the activity, the revolutionary activity of the working class itself, and socialism is, if you like, the introductory period before the development of full communism, because there is required a transition period after a revolution. But the essence of it is a new type of government in, for, and by the working class. Now, to link this with our previous discussion about the development of war and capitalism. Fundamentally, capitalism is driven to war through the rise of inequality, social inequality. It appears as most profound in the United States at the moment. But capitalism has come to the point where you have a very thin layer of absolutely historically unequalled privilege and wealth. Trump has around him a layer of oligarchs who are dictating social inequality, dictating every aspect of social life. And fundamentally, this level of inequality is completely incompatible with democratic rule, democratic forms of rule. So in one way or another, and following the same example, capitalist countries around the world are imposing oligarchic or authoritarian regimes on the working class, and our position is that the working class will fight back and is beginning to fight back. There is there are massive movements now occurring internationally amongst the working class, and they what they need is a genuine socialist leadership to produce the consciousness required for the working class to overthrow the capitalist system, and overthrowing the capitalist system means a complete change into a new form of government, a new form of society. So the conception that that socialism is just a sort of a change to that it's government control is not correct.
Well, it's government controlled now anyway.
Well, that's right.
Definitely.
And you can see that whenever the oligarchs get into trouble, as they did during the pandemic and the 2008 financial crisis, and as they will again in the next financial crisis, the government will intervene in the US or even here to bail them out.
Bail out the banks.
Yeah.
Bail out, yeah.
So but I just wanted to connect this to the case of Bogdan, because this is why he has been imprisoned. It's not simply opposing the war, but putting forward a strategy that can actually end all wars through. I mean, the court verdict. One of the things they accused him of was the socially dangerous consequences of his political positions. Of his political ideas. What does that mean? I mean, from the standpoint of the Ukrainian oligarchy and the imperialist powers, he is telling Russian and Ukrainian workers that there is an alternative to slaughtering each other in the war, and that they are not each other's enemies, the Russian and Ukrainian working class. And that's an important element of Marxism, of socialism. As it says in the Communist Manifesto, workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. And that is our position today. I mean, this war ultimately is the result of an outdated capitalist system that has divided up the world into rival nation states and mobilizes workers to kill each other for profit. And so he put forward, and to quote from one of Bogdan's speeches in 2022, that in our world there is only one social and historical force capable of uniting humanity on an international basis, and that is the working class. It is the only social force that increases and strengthens with the development of capitalism, and it is its product and therefore has a real opportunity to overthrow capitalism and replace it with a new classless society based on the conscious planning of production and a distribution of resources that meets the needs of society as a whole. And that's what we mean by socialism. And that's what the ruling elite believes is so dangerous that they've got to throw him in prison and ban our website and ban, outlaw any discussion of communism. I mean, this is the so-called democracy in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it's, there's no shortage of anger, there's no shortage of opposition to the war in Ukraine. Within Ukraine itself, there is mass opposition to it. But what it's lacking is political leadership. And they are aware that the young guard of Bolshevik Leninists, the group that Bogdan was leading, could, under conditions of war, under conditions of mass opposition, it could find a road to that and mobilize and bring back, really, the socialist traditions of Ukraine. I mean, Trotsky was born in Ukraine, and many of the leaders of the Russian Revolution were from Ukraine. So it has those traditions there, and they need to be rediscovered in order to stop this fascist regime. and the development of a world war that could lead to, nuclear war across Europe, that is taking place. So I really would urge. I just want to mention for listeners to go to the World Socialist website, wsws.org/free Bogdan, wsws.org/free Bogdan. You'll find the online petition, which we are promoting, and we are also calling on people to directly email us and also the court in Ukraine to denounce this sentence. The verdict is going to be appealed, and Bogdan's lawyers are preparing that. And as I said, there's no legal basis at all for this imprisonment. But we have no illusions about the justice system in Ukraine. What's going to secure his freedom and secure freedom for all political prisoners in Ukraine and elsewhere, in Palestine as well, in Israel, is mass opposition among working people, and this should be seen as part of the movement to stop a third world war that is already underway.